Hey, movie fans. So I saw Lee Cronin's and Mommy at the theaters. Now, I was really excited for this movie based on one thing, is that you had the Evil Dead Rise director directing this. Which I loved Evil Dead Rise. It's up there with the original Evil Dead trilogy for me. So I was really excited to see what this director's take would be on the classic monster, the Mommy. And also a full-on horror version of the Mommy sounded really exciting for me too. Even though the trailers look pretty generic for the movie, my overall thoughts on this movie when I sat down and watched it was I thought this movie was terrible. Let me start with the positives of Lee Cronin's The Mommy. First positive is that it's a very well shot, very well directed movie. Possession dying wise, the movie looks great. And when it comes to the little girl, the kid who plays this version of the mommy in the movie, I think she's great in the movie. She gives a great performance. She does come off creepy. The negatives with this movie is I didn't care about any of the characters in this movie. When it comes to the family in this movie, the story's focused on. The actor who played the dad of the family, I thought his performance was not all that great. Like, I thought he gave a weak performance in this movie. The story I thought was poor. The dialogue is really bad and rough at times. I think he gets some of it. And when it tries to go for these emotional moments between the husband and wife, it just falls completely flat for me. Like, there's one moment where they're arguing with each other, which is an example of some bad dialogue, where I was just like, just the actor who plays them is like your performance just isn't coming off that like believable or good to me personally. And it's just like I said, the dialogue is just really bad at times in this movie. You have characters also making just choices that don't make any logical sense, dumb, stupid choices in this movie as the movie goes along. So that was another problem I had with the movie. There's this one moment in the movie, and I thought this was a bad editing, at least for me personally, where you have the dad. We like throughout the movie, he's trying to figure out what happened to the kid. She gets kidnapped early in the movie, and then these people find out in this coffin. So he's like trying to figure out what happened to her, and he finds out that there's this woman that's been coming by and seeing his daughter from this candy she's been getting. I think it was these like chocolate bars. So he's looking through all these cards and he's sitting down looking at all these cars and the light flickers while he's downstairs. And he just nonchalantly looks over and then goes back to looking at the cars. I understand he's obsessed throughout the movie trying to figure out what happened to his and his wife's daughter. The problem I have with that moment is that I felt like there should have been a scene after that where he should have showed him going upstairs to check on his other two kids because they have two other kids in the house. And I found it very odd editing wise that like you have your daughter here who's acting like creepy and weird. You have two other kids in this house. Like you're not gonna go up and check to see why the lights were flickering. I just thought that was like a weird editing choice in that moment of the movie. I also think with the Egyptian law, I feel like they don't dive enough into that in this movie. Like this feels like a movie where they were just like, we're gonna call it the mommy, but it doesn't even feel like a mommy movie to me. Like the Egyptian stuff feels like it's just barely touched on in this movie, and I feel like you could have dived more into Egyptian lore in this movie to make it feel more like a mommy movie. And I have no problem if you want to do a different interpretation of the mommy. I've never seen the old classic mommy movies. I've only seen the Brendan Fraser ones. And you look at the Brendan Fraser ones, they did something different. The difference between that was that to me it was executed in a great way. Like the Brendan Fraser ones went for an action adventure with some horror. And I felt like the first movie did that fantastically in the first Mario movie. So I have no problem like with a Mario movie. If you're gonna do a Mario movie, to do something different, genre wise or tone wise. I just felt like this movie just you could have named this movie something else and not even called it the Mommy. And then when it comes to another problem I have with this movie is how nasty and gross it is at times. There were some moments in this movie where I think that's really where I was like, oh, that's really cool. That's really gross in a way where I'm like entertained. Where I was like, okay, that's entertaining with how gross it is. Like it was more nastier this with the violence and how gross this movie was than I thought it was gonna be. So I give it credit for that. Then there's other times in the movie I was like, it just felt like they were overdoing it with how nasty and gross this movie was. There was times like, really, do you need to go that far? It just feels like you're doing this just for the sake of it. And that's really the only thing that stands out about this movie is how nasty it is at times. and gross. Otherwise, this movie feels pretty generic, and it just felt like at times they were doing it just for the sake of doing it. Like I have no problem with a movie going pretty. I have no problem with horror movies being really gross and nasty. This was the first time I watched a horror movie in theaters. I'm like, this just feels like you're just doing it just for like shock value or just to do it because let's just be gross and nasty just for the sake of it. Because of the fact you don't have anything interesting story or character wise in this movie. So yeah, the gore stood out in this movie with how nasty and gross it was. It was more gross than I thought it would be. Parts where I thought was like cool, and then there's other parts where I'm like, it just feels like you're just doing it just for the sake of doing it, and it feels like you're overdoing it to a point where I'm not. Where I found like half of the gross, nasty gore in this movie, I was just like, I wasn't really enjoying it personally. I also have a problem with this movie where it feels like like I said, it feels generic. It feels like if you took an Sism possessed movie and you put it with an Evil Dead movie. I know the director came out and said this is an Evil Dead universe, which you can feel it because, like for example, when a grandmother gets killed in this movie and she comes back, she basically feels like a deadite to me. And even the dialogue she has and the dialogue the little girl has at times feels like dialogue you would hear from like Deadites from Evil Dead with how nasty they would talk and the sexual like stuff they would be saying. It just feels like dialogue we hear from Deadites. So like I don't have a problem with the idea of taking like certain movies and like putting them together like the movie They Will Kill You, which I thought was a fun, solid, entertaining, all the way over the top action movie. That movie is basically if you took the Wait or Not movies and the Kill Bill movies and put them together, and that made for a fun, entertaining movie. The execution with this movie, if you took a Exorcism Possessed movie and an Evil Dead movie, felt to me that the execution I thought wasn't very good in this movie. And it didn't do it in a way where I was like find it to be where I found it to be entertaining. Also, the third act of this movie gets so ridiculous and bonkers in a way that I personally was like, this is getting really dumb now. It just gets too ridiculous for me. I was like, okay. Because the first two acts I think felt at least like, even though they felt generic, they at least felt grounded. The third act gets so bonkers. I was just like, this is just getting really like over the top, not in a fun way for me personally. I was like, this is getting too ridiculous. So overall, my thoughts on Lee Cronin's The Mommy was I just did not like this movie. I thought it was terrible. One of the worst to me, one of the worst movies of the year for me personally. And look, I can see some people having fun with this movie. And I can see with how nasty and gross this movie is with its violence, I can see people having fun with that element of the movie. And if I can see people also having fun just because it does feel like Evil Dead basically. It just for me personally, I just felt like the story and characters were weak. The dialogue was bad at times. I just felt no emotional attachment towards any of these characters. It felt like they were just being nasty for the sake of being nasty, and it just didn't really feel like a mommy movie to me at all. So that's my thoughts on Lee Cronin's The Mommy. Until next time, fans.